Hi, it's Angela and welcome back to my channel, and today we're going to do the Meet the Fantasy Reader book tag. I think last month I did the Meet the Sci-Fi Reader book tag, so I will link that up above if you want to see that. I am a primarily fantasy and science fiction reader, although I think I've been with the fantasy genre in book form longer. So I really wanted to do this tag. I was thinking about it while doing the sci-fi one, so let's get into it. 1. What is your fantasy origin story? Alright, so probably real talk, if you've been here for a while, you know, Bailey School Kids. These are these short little chapter books that you can read in like 1st or 2nd grade, depending on who you are, and they're great. They're about these students who are trying to figure out if their teachers are vampires or mummies or mermaids, and they're a whole bunch of fun. I also would have to blame Matilda. Matilda is a book that I adored. I also really loved the movie. Both of those were really a big part of like my early years being like, fantasy is so cool. And then of course, Harry Potter was a big deal for me growing up. If you can't tell, I destroyed this book. I've reread this book probably 10 times. So that was a big deal for me, but I think the series that helped me transition from middle grade into young adult, which would then lead me eventually to adult fantasy, was His Dark Materials by Philip Pullman. I love this trilogy so much. I got this from the Princess at Castle Library. I'll link her down below. This has 3 books in it. The Golden Compass, Subtle Knife, Amber Spyglass. There is a TV show for it on BBC or HBO, depending on where you are in the world. And I love this story, the world building and the characters. This was the first story that almost brought me to tears because of what happens in the Amber Spyglass. And I reread it as an adult and it still holds up. So this is up there. So honestly, that's probably mostly my origin story. And then I guess if you want to know the complete trajectory getting into adult fantasy, that would have been Elantris by Brandon Sanderson. That's the story that got me into adult fantasy. I started that in 2007, I believe. So that's me from little chapter books you give like a 1st grader all the way to huge tomes. 2. If you could be the hero in a fantasy novel, who would be the author and what's one trope you'd insist be in the story? All right, so trope. I have two requirements. 1, I want a sassy companion. This could be like a cat animal thing. This could be like an inanimate object, but I want them to be able to communicate with me and be my best friend, but in a sassy way. And because that's something I really want, I think I'm gonna go with Robert Jackson Bennett, who I've really liked what he's done with his character work in the Divine Cities trilogy and also with Foundryside, but particularly, I really have enjoyed his character work in the Divine Cities trilogy. I really liked a lot of his female characters there. And he does incorporate the trope I like in one of the books that I've mentioned extremely well. So I think I will go with him. Another trope that, real talk, I want to be the chosen one. I kind of want that. And I want to be someone learning how to use magic. I do like that. I do like the whole learning how to be good at a new skill thing. So those are like the elements I'd want to be in my story. And I do think Robert Jackson Bennett's a good fit. I was also thinking of Emma Wang and Jemison and Sanderson. Any of them would do a fantastic job, but it'd be really hard for me to choose just one. 3. What is a fantasy you've read this year that you want more people to read? This is really hard. I do have reviews for a lot of my favorite fantasies I've read this year, like The City We Became and The Sword of Kaigen. Obviously, I want more people to read those. But I think one that's not talked about enough is the Inheritance trilogy, which I didn't read the 1st book this year, but obviously you start with it. So this is the 100,000 Kingdoms by N.K. Jemisin, and I really like this trilogy, and I need more people to read it, so I have more people to talk to about it. I need a reread of this, probably next year, because there's so much to unpack. N.K. Jemisin's one of my favorite authors. I do have a whole author spotlight video if you want to know where to start with her. This is her 1st published series, and I really love I really love all the gods in this. I really love the characters and the themes, And I just know people read her Broken Earth trilogy, or they've been reading The City We Became, all of which are amazing, but I want more people to read this, so that's up there. And I do have a review for the whole trilogy, but it's one of my first videos, so if you choose to watch that, just be warned, it was back in like January. Number 4, what is your favorite fantasy subgenre? What subgenre have you not read much from? If you want more detailed thoughts, I made a whole video where I tier ranked different fantasy genres based off a tier ranking video Jashana did, and she made the whole tier list. It was really fun. But short answer, I don't read a lot of military or medieval fantasy. I do read some, but it's not my go-to. Those aren't like my buzzwords that make me pick them up. I love dying worlds and lots of mythology, which is why like The Cosmere is perfect for me by Sanderson, because The Cosmere has like the Stormlight Archives and the Mistborn trilogy are both worlds that are going towards an apocalyptic state. It's so fun, and you get to like, I don't know why I like watching things burn, but that's just kind of what's happening. And with like mythology, like the Inheritance trilogy, I really like when there's a lot of like mythical things happening. It's one of my favorite things, whether it's based off mythology in our world or if it's just made up for that world. So yeah, that's the short answer, but I do have a whole video on subgenres in fantasy. 5, who is one of your auto-buy fantasy authors? Well, I did kind of mention it, and you probably can tell from my shelves, but this whole top shelf is Sanderson, and I do auto-buy, pre-order, get many editions of Sanderson books. He's the author that got me into adult fantasy. I know he's not for everyone. I am not one of those people who's going to say you're less of a fantasy reader because you don't like Sanderson. It's personal taste. If you like to have your writing have more lush prose, I can see why you don't like his writing. If you don't like how he tells stories, that's just subjective, you know? I can feel that. But for me, I love how he tells stories, and I love his adult fantasy. I don't get along well with his young adults as much, but his adult fantasy is just, for me, really fun. I have such a great time. It checks all the boxes for why I pick up a pleasure read. So he's my auto-buy, followed closely by N.K. Jemisin. I own everything she's written except the Broken Earth trilogy, and that's because it's my favorite and I want to have those in really nice editions, but I can't seem to find anything but the paperbacks, and the few hardbacks there are way too expensive, so I just have this idea that the minute I buy the Broken Earth trilogy, there will be special editions announced and I'm going to kick myself. So Jemisin is also an author that if she says, I have a new book coming out, I'm like, buy. And if you're new here, I don't buy books often. You're not going to see a lot of hauls on this channel. I'm typically someone who puts in holds at the library, so to be an author I buy from is a pretty big deal. 6, how do you typically find fantasy recommendations? This is hard. For a long time, I just went to my bookstore and looked at what interested me on the shelf. And then I think a few years ago, I was deciding, you know, I want to read more of X. So I think a couple years ago, I was like, you know, I want to read more fantasy by Black authors. I want to find Latin authors. Like, I just wanted that. I was missing that in my world building. And so I would just look for blogs that talked about that. Now that I have BookTube, I watch all of those videos. Whenever someone says recommending books by whatever marginalized group, I'm clicking on that and I'm just taking notes. So those are a big way I find books now. So BookTube is very helpful. Definitely if a friend has a favorite, I almost always read that. That's happened with a lot of books. Like, I mean, I'm reading The Wheel of Time right now because it's so many of my friends' favorite series. I'll always do that, and that's how I found Robin Hobb. One of my college friends was like, has anyone read this? I've been reading it and I love it and I'm going to see her at a convention. And I love to be able to talk to my friends about books they like. So that's a big part of it. But sometimes it's just chance. I know the fantasy subreddit has been a place I found a lot of my favorites sometimes, but I also find that sometimes that Reddit says the same 10 things over and over again, so I've already read those. And so I think that's why I branched out, and then I discovered BookTube, and that's been really fun. But you know, it's a little bit of A, a little bit of B, it's all over the place. 7, what is an upcoming fantasy release you're excited for? Well, if you didn't say Rhythm of War, you're wrong. I actually already have Dawnshard in my hand. I'm already halfway through Dawnshard, so that's not anticipated anymore. That's a reality. But it's Rhythm of War. Counting down the days, especially with Dawnshard. I'm like, whoa, Dawnshard has a lot of cool world building. We'll talk about it later, but yeah, it's Rhythm of War. 8. What is one misconception about fantasy you would like to lay to rest? Many, many, many. Well, I guess something I want publishing to know specifically is that they need to publish more voices in fantasy. Fantasy is something that will sell no matter whose voice you put behind it. Young adult fantasy has gotten a way big leg up on it versus adult, but like, I want to be able to make a list of 10 amazing authors in every group. I mean, I can do that easily with white men, I can do that easily with white women, but I can't do that with Black people or Hispanic people or Asian authors. Like, it's getting better. I can make you a top 10 list of people of color authors, but I couldn't do it for each group, and that's what I want. Like, it's not good enough to just have one Latin American author. You need to have so many. There's so many countries. It's not good enough to have a few Black authors. There's a whole continent, and then there's many different variations on the Black experience in every country. I just need more stories, and the young adult publishing is realizing that. They're pushing more of their voices, but I need that in my adult fantasy space. It's something I've been craving for years, and I still read books by white authors. I have nothing against white male authors or white female authors. It's just, I want more, and I know publishers are scared. They won't make as much money. It won't sell as well, and that's just a lie. It's going to sell, okay? If you are invested in the story, if the story is good, it's going to connect with people. It's going to be great. So that's more to publishers, less to you guys. I feel many people know that fantasy isn't just like a men's genre anymore. You know, it's definitely has a good amount of space for women, especially if you know what books you like. It's not a monolith of a genre. It has a lot going on, more now than ever. It's still one of my favorites, but it still has room to improve and give me more amazing stories. 9. If someone had never read a fantasy before and asked you to recommend the first 3 books that came to mind as places to start, what would those recommendations be? I knew this question was coming. So I do have a standalone fantasy book recommendations video, and I feel like a lot of mine would be from that list because I think standalones are more accessible than trilogies, especially if I'm talking to someone who hasn't been reading fantasy. Like, if their last fantasy book was Harry Potter back in high school, I'm not going to shove them into the Stormlight Archives sort of thing. So I was thinking standalones, although then that means I can't recommend a Jemison, which just feels like a crime. And I'm gonna base this off where I've actually had success. So, I have had a lot of success with Elantris by Brandon Sanderson. It's a standalone. It's one of my favorites. I don't know why BookTube hates on this book. It's probably because they didn't find it when I did. Like, I have a lot of nostalgia for this book. This book's my baby. And the reason I've been collecting these really fancy things, it's a really slippery slope, man. This is an amazing story about 3 characters. You've got a prince, a princess, and a priest. The prince is claimed to be dead, but he was taken by the Shroud, so he's part of the cursed city of Elantris now. The princess was engaged to this prince. When he dies, is now married to him and is stuck in a kingdom she's not used to and has to engage in those politics. And the priest is here to try and save these people, convert them to his religion, or else he thinks they will all die because of his country. It's got political maneuverings, it's got character development, it's got this great mystery about why Elantris is cursed, because it didn't used to be cursed. And this has worked well with my grandmother. My grandmother doesn't read fantasy. This is a very accessible read for people who are not in the fantasy genre, and Sanderson has a very accessible writing style, so if you haven't read a book in a long time, I know people think this pacing's all over the place, but I do think every word is written in a way that makes it super accessible. And I just love it. So that's definitely one of them. And then, I know I said I was going to stick to standalones, but I've had a lot of good luck with The City We Became by N.K. Jemisin. I actually gave this to my friend back home when she's like, I need a story that makes me happy, that's like a positive look on like the Black experience. And although there is drama in this, I gave her this book to read and she adored it. And she hasn't read in a very long time. I mean, work's just crazy. So I think this works well for people who want something that's more, they're more used to, so urban fantasy. And I just think it's a great love letter to New York. So I guess you have to like New York or want to know about New York City. But I think this was worked really well for people. I'm running out of space to put things. And then the third one that I've had a lot of good luck with is Uprooted by Naomi Novik. This is more I give to my friends who I know like more romance in their books. This romance doesn't work for everyone, but it has worked for a lot of the people I've given this to. This is kind of a pseudo Beauty and the Beast retelling where Agnieszka is taken away by this sorcerer called the Dragon to protect the valley from this really creepy forest. It's a really cool creepy forest. And it's about her discovering her connection to magic and this forest, and her and the sorcerer figuring things out and how they can combine their magics. I've had a lot of good luck with this being especially a good transition book from young adult into adult fantasy. So those are like the three, I guess, off the top of my head. But like there are so many. Like I like to curate things to the person that I'm recommending things to. So like I feel like these are three pretty different authors. You definitely have a more atmospheric author. You have the lyrical, beautiful prose of Jemison, and then the very straightforward prose of Sanderson. But they're all complete stories. Like I say, The City We Became is the start of a trilogy, but like it ends at an ending. You don't have to be rushing to the sequel. And now 10, who is the most recent fantasy reading content creator you came across that you'd like to shout out? I don't have any that I've been following recently, so instead what I'm going to say is the World Hoppers BookTube channel. This is a new collaborative BookTube space. It's starting with 4 creators that are pretty well known on BookTube, but Elliot Brooks, Jessie May, Jade from Bedtime Bookworm, and Jashana from Jashana C. Those 4 women have started this collaborative BookTube channel that's going to incorporate other booktubers, and it's going to be more than just fantasy, but these 4 booktubers are heavily towards fantasy, and I do think you'll see a lot of good fantasy content on that collaborative channel, and all AdSense and money goes towards like a charity effort, so that's really good. So I think that's what I'm going to say in answer to that. But like so many people that I mention in my vlogs or wrap-ups, like they're amazing fantasy booktube content creators, so I would check all of them out. And that's it for this tag. If you made it this far, tell me the fantasy book that got you into the genre, or movie or TV show. It doesn't have to be a book. For me, it was books, but as you saw in my sci-fi video, it wasn't necessarily books that got me into sci-fi. And like if you liked it, subscribe if you want to, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.